Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. This is an update of the Ukrainian front and some updates of the Russian offensive operation. I have some articles where the Ukrainians claim that Russians stalled their advance, their offensive is not going anywhere, it's in an inertia. And I have some other articles coming from Ukrainians again, where they tell us that actually the Ukrainians are going to continue their offensive and will advance, most likely. So let's get going. I have articles from the Ukrainians, I have articles from the Russians, I have maps. So let's start with this article first. This article is from Ukrainska Pravda from today, the 19th of March 2023. Ukraine's defense forces strike 2 Russian anti-aircraft missile systems and several clusters of Russian forces, General Staff report. So this is the Ukrainian general assessment of the situation on the front. This is from 6 o'clock p.m. Kiev time on March 19th. Now that's one. The other one is the article I have here is from Ukrinform, which is a new Ukrainian media outlet. And it says that military expects continuation of Russian offensive in Avdiivka and Marinka areas. And then we have the Donetsk again. We have the Chasiv Yar, and where it says that all children evacuate from this town. And this town stays right in front of Bakhmut, right here. Artemovsk is Bakhmut's. The Russians call it Bakhmut, the Soviets call it Bakhmut. So this is the town right here. So the Ukrainians are evacuating the children from here now. After they published an article saying that the Russians' offensive in Artemovsk or Bakhmut stalled. Okay, but you are evacuating the children now when it stalled. Why didn't you evacuate when they were coming? Doesn't make sense. So this is the Russian update of the front from the 19th of March 2023. So let's start with the first article, which is the general update from the General Staff of Ukraine Armed Forces. And then when we get to Avdiivka and Marinka, so the next one right here, I'm going to go to the map and I will explain which are right here, Avdiivka and Marinka right here. The Ukrainians are usually starting there to explain the update from here, from first a general summary, very, how should I say, not vague, but not very detailed, the general terms, and then they go to Chernihiv, then they go to Sumy, then they go to Kharkiv, then go to Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, and then they go here to Kherson. So they go like this. All right, so let's start with this one. Ukraine defense forces have struck a Russian anti-aircraft missile system, several clusters of Russian military personnel and equipment, and an ammunition storage point. No civilians whatsoever. Quote, over the course of the past day, Ukrainian aircraft carried out an airstrike on a Russian anti-aircraft missile system. The model has yet to be confirmed. 6 airstrike on clusters of occupation forces and equipment, and 1 on an ammunition storage point. No civilians. Units of rocket forces and artillery struck an enemy Tor anti-aircraft missile systems and 2 clusters of occupation forces. So this is the general thing. I also start the general stuff from here to here, and then below we'll starting from north, going east, and then east, south, southeast. Over the course, they already told us this, but I'm going to read it. Over the course of the past 24 hours, Russian forces carried out 1 missile strike and several airstrike and destroyed multiple launch rocket system MLRS 9 times. In Zaporozhye Oblast, Russian occupation forces ruthlessly target a residential building in the Vasilivka district and several civilian infrastructure facilities in the village of Kamyansky. So you see, the Russians are aiming only for civilians, the Ukrainians are not. So obviously we know who are the war criminals here, right? Right. The Russian army also shelled several civilian infrastructure facilities in Donetsk Oblast, killing and injuring civilians, damaging multi-story buildings, privately owned houses and schools. There is a high ongoing threat of Russian airstrike throughout Ukraine. Again, so these are the, how should I put it, the charges that some courts are using in order to issue warrants and other stuff. Reports like this. Well, you have to believe them, right? Right. Now, there was no significant changes in the Volyn, Polisia, Sivershchinya, and Slabozhanchanya fronts. On the course of the past day, Russian forces shelled areas in and around in Chernihiv Oblast, they say, then they say Sumy Oblast, and Kharkiv Oblast. So the Russians shelled, according to Ukrainians, these areas right here, where the Russians are allowed as a fish, if you know what I mean, like nothing. Okay, let's go back to the Ukrainians. On the Kupiansk and Liman fronts. Now, these fronts are talking about right here. So I'm going to make this a little bit like bigger here. So they start going down here with the front. So they're going to tell us that in Kupiansk and Liman fronts, Russian forces are continuing their attempts to break through the Ukrainian defense. So that means they're trying to advance, right? I'm guessing. They conducted an unsuccessful offensive, there you have it, operation in the vicinity of Novoselivske and shelled areas in and around Vesele, Kupiansk, Krokhmalny, Pischande, and Berestove. This is in Kharkiv Oblast, and Novoselivske, Nevske, and Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast. So they're talking about this. Kharkiv Oblast is right here, and here is the Luhansk, and below is Donetsk. We're talking about this area where, if you see, and you are, here's Kupiansk they were talking about. They shelled, but here the Russians say, no, actually we downed something, a helicopter or an aircraft. Let's see. Russian fighter aircraft shot down a Ukrainian Mi-8 helicopter. And here, where you see the red stuff here, the circles, these are where the Russians shelled. So let's see what they did here. Operation Tactical Aviation, Artillery, and Heavy Flamethrower Systems of the Zapad group of forces struck Ukrainian forces. So these are just shelling. Let's see what happened here where the Russians really advanced. In Kupiansk, the Ukrainians evacuated town. They evacuated the civilian population. So they're expecting these guys to come over Red Rover. So let's see what's going on here. So in the Kharkiv, the Russians call it Kharkov region, it says here that the forces of Zapad group foiled 2 attempts by the enemy to conduct combat reconnaissance. A Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group was destroyed. Here, this is a down drone here. Russian air defenses forces shot down a Ukrainian UAV. And then we're going to go down here towards Bakhmut, which is right here, Artemovsk. Well, let's see what the Ukrainians are saying here. On the Bakhmut front, Russian forces keep trying to capture the city of Bakhmut. Ukrainian forces repelled Russian assaults in the vicinities of Bakhmut, Ivanivske, Bogdanivka, and Krihorivka, Vasyukivka, Bakhmut, blah, 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 and several other settlements in Donetsk Oblast came under Russian fire. So the Russians tried to advance in Ivanivske and Bakhmut, and these two right here, I can tell you for sure where those are. We have, if that's gonna let us work a little bit. So we have Artemovsk, this is Bakhmut. Ivanivske is right here, is west of Bakhmut. So let's see what these guys are saying happened in Bakhmut. There is fighting in the city, nothing else. Move on. We're going to go to the next one, which is Avdiivka and Marinka. Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shakhtarsk fronts. Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the vicinity of Paparaparapa on Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shakhtarsk front. So those are south of Artemovsk, right here. This is Avdiivka right here. This is Marinka. This is Vuhledar. Some towns that have really different names. For instance, let's say Ugledar versus Vuhledar. It sounds familiar, but if you look at the Artemovsk and Bakhmut, no resemblance. So this is where the Russians supposedly are a little bit more successful. Let's see what they're doing in Avdiivka. Fighting is taking place on the outskirts of the city, Marinka. Fighting is ongoing on the western part of the city. This hasn't changed in about 2 weeks, I think. And in Vuhledar, fighting is ongoing on the outskirts of the city. Operational tactical aviation and artillery of the Vostok group of forces struck Ukrainian units. Well, you see here the blue circles. Here's where the Ukrainians bombarded. So this is their shelling. Let's say what they did in Donetsk. Ukrainian forces shelled in blah blah blah. 25 MLRS rockets and 25 shells were fired at the city. A man was killed and a woman was wounded. So you see, they kill civilians as well. But hey, the International Criminal Court doesn't see that. Here, as I said, these are where the Russians destroyed some drones. Russian Air Defense Forces shot down a Ukrainian UAV. So let's go and see these three things here in the next article, where it says that military experts expects continuation of Russian offensive in Avdiivka and Marinka area. So this is from Ukrinform today, the 19th of March. The armed forces of Ukraine expect the continuation of the Russian offensive in Avdiivka and Marinka area in the near future. And I'm quoting, in the near future, we still expect the continuation of offensive actions in the areas of Avdiivka and Marinka. In Vuhledar direction, this is the one in the south, we expect a calm situation for the time being. But the enemy continues to fire tube artillery, MLRS, and launch airstrikes. This happens all the time, and the Russian Federation launched rather powerful strikes. End quote. In addition, the head of the Joint Press Center of Defense Forces of Tavria direction stated that a certain strategic lull has been established in Vuhledar direction at this moment, but Ukrainian intelligence officers are working and blah blah blah. Nothing happens there according. Oh, this is I think this is the video of the day. How come this comes here? I thought this was the Wagner group taking over that. Yeah, I'm surprised it's right here, taking over that northern part of the steel or whatever that not steel factory in Bakhmut. All right, let's go back to the Ukrainian update. Russian occupation forces are on the defensive on Zaporozhye and Kherson fronts. They shelled areas in and around. They give you a few settlements here in Zaporozhye Oblast, and that is on the map south of Vuhledar. This is Zaporozhye, this is Kherson. In Zaporozhye, the Russians, the only thing that they say is, hey, we bombarded this little thing. Operation Tactical Aviation and Artillery of the Vostok group of forces struck Ukrainian forces. And here, all this blue is the Ukrainians, the red is the Russians. Here, a drone down. Nothing, no advancement, nobody attacks anybody face to face. So, these are the... Let me just show you this little thing that would probably give you a better understanding of what's going in Bakhmut. All children evacuated from Chasiv Yar, Donetsk region, and I show you where Chasiv Yar is. I'm gonna go here to Artemovsk right here. Artemovsk is Bakhmut, Chasiv or Chasov by the Russians is right here. And another article said that the Russians are stalled and they're in inertia. Okay, but you take your children out. That makes sense. All right. Well, this is the update. The Russians are not stopping their offensive. The Ukrainians are not conducting any offensive operations. They said they will start a counteroffensive in the spring. We're waiting for that. Probably they wait for some more airplanes, tanks, whatever they get. We'll see if they're going to have power to do that, strength. Now, I have to remind you, if you maybe you know, maybe you don't, Ukrainians supposedly have a volunteer group now, the offensive, something like that, offensive group of volunteers. It's about 30,000 people already. They might be speaking different languages, if you know what I mean, but hey, they are the volunteers. And then also the Ukrainians have about, I don't know, 10,000 at least people outside of their borders training in the Baltic states, Poland, Germany, I don't know, in many countries on this planet, except Russia. So when those guys are going to come, they're going to be probably speaking different languages as well. But hey, those are, again, that's Ukrainian military or Ukrainian volunteers, international volunteers, or, you know, if they get killed, they're international volunteers. If they get, you know, they don't get killed, they are, I don't know, whatever they say, euphemisms and weasel words. But hey, this is just from this side. The other side probably does the same thing. Why? Because we're human. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.